Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our ongoing candidate forum series. I'm Ron Halber, director of the JCRC of Greater Washington, and I'm pleased to introduce you to gubernatorial candidate John Barron. As a 501c3, the JCRC does not support or oppose any candidate for public office, but these meetings are critical to fulfilling our mission to educate the Jewish community and promote civic participation. If many of you haven't noticed, the JCRC put out a voter's guide that has been distributed by text to over 50,000 Montgomery County Jewish voters, and it is really being pushed out into the community by Jewish organizations and social media. And we urge you to look at that nonpartisan guide to educate yourself rather on where the candidates running for a variety of levels of office, where they stand on issues of concern with the general and Jewish communities. JCRC represents over 100 organizations, synagogues, and schools to advocate not only for the needs and values of our community, but for the well-being of everyone in our own region, including the most vulnerable. Now let me introduce our guest, John Barron. For the past 20 years, John has worked inside and outside of government to introduce our nation's challenges, whether it be improving education, expanding access to affordable healthcare, or fighting for racial equality. As a staffer on Capitol Hill, and I found this very interesting, he worked with members of Congress to enact a new program that now awards $450 million each year to small technology companies to create new products and dollars. So you know a thing or two about economic development, John. Later, as a Clinton administration official, John headed a nearly $1 billion technology program and won awards for reinventing government. In 2001, John co-founded and ran a nonprofit that sparked movement to advance evidence-based policy making through government, and worked in the Bush and Obama administrations and Congress to enact major reforms to social programs. I love the idea that you were able to work in a bipartisan fashion and work on for both administrations. It says a lot about you. These reforms led to significant gains in worker earnings, student achievement, and other life outcomes. Most recently, as vice president of a national philanthropy, John headed the largest philanthropic initiative in the nation that identifies and expands proven effective social programs. John, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Talk to us about your race for governor. Why did you get into the race, and why are you running, sir?
Well, thank you, Ron, and thanks to everyone. Thanks to the JCRC for this opportunity. I've long been familiar with the work when I was a member of the Beth High congregation, which is one of your constituent organizations. I've been a longtime admirer of the work of the JCRC for our community. So that's who I am. You've covered it on the personal front. You know, I've lived in Bethesda. My wife and I have lived in Bethesda, Maryland for 28 years, and I spent most of my childhood here. I actually went to the same Maryland public schools that my kids went to. I live about 2 miles down the street from the house where I grew up. So career-wise, as you mentioned, I've founded and ran a nonprofit for 14 years, so that was very effective. I've been a Clinton administration official. I headed a $1 billion technology program, won awards for reinventing government. I've been an appointee of Democratic and Republican presidents. I've gotten major federal legislation enacted into law. So the reason I'm running for governor is that Maryland isn't making progress on major problems that are damaging millions of lives. And I'm offering a fundamentally different approach than the other candidates. In education, for instance, more than a quarter of middle school students in our state cannot read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers are no different than 20 years ago. More than 500,000 Marylanders live below the poverty line. And our state has made no progress reducing our poverty rate in more than 30 years. Moderate income Marylanders have seen flat wages since the 1980s as income inequality has soared. Racial inequities persist in all of these areas. Our state cannot just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven government program after another and expect a different result. Because unfortunately, many programs, no matter how well-meaning they are, don't work, as we've seen too often when the results are actually measured. So to make progress, we need to expand solutions that don't just sound like they're good ideas, but have actually been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. That's been the mission of my career and of the bipartisan reforms that I've gotten enacted into law. Now it's time to bring this evidence-based approach that I've spearheaded to Maryland. So, Ron, when I'm the governor of Maryland, we're going to do what's proven to work. I'll give you 3 quick examples. Number 1, in education. We will provide high-quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because that has been shown to move them up toward grade level early before the problems get serious in later grades. It is also the most effective tool we have to address COVID-related learning loss. We're going to do this by recruiting an army of people from the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service. Second example, in the area of workforce development, we're going to partner with businesses across the state of Maryland to provide effective job training to every young adult in the state who wants to advance. If it's done right, job training has been shown to increase earnings as much as 40%. But the key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries like IT and healthcare, and also to work hand in hand with local employers who provide paid internships to the trainees. So under my plan, the state will pay for the training, the employers pay for the internships, our economy gets skilled workers, everyone benefits. Third example, in the area of healthcare, we will expand innovations in healthcare delivery that have been proven to improve health and reduce healthcare costs. As one example, there's a program in Los Angeles that pairs Black barbershops with pharmacists. So when the men come in to get their hair cut, they get screened for high blood pressure, and if needed, they get medication. This program has been shown to reduce the rate of uncontrolled hypertension, which is a leading killer of Black men, by more than half. That's a huge public health benefit.
John, let me ask you a question right now.
Yeah.
How come, it's very interesting to listen to it's almost like a ComStat for every program in government that you're talking about. Like every program has to show its evidence. If so many of these programs, like you talk about, like barbershop and pharmacies terminating, why do you think they haven't been? I mean, if some of these are so obvious and they work, why do you think these programs by definition are just not duplicated across? Why, when a program is seen to work in one place, in one community, do you think it's not sort of automatically adopted around the country?
Because there is the way, I'll give you the short answer to that, the way that, and this has been, again, the mission of my career,
please,
primarily focused at the federal level, but also to some extent the state level. There's no government funds when they go out from federal to state to local, and et cetera. It goes out through basically a turn the crank mechanism, meaning usually a formula or some other method where evidence about what actually works plays very little role in what gets funded. So there are programs like these that have, that really improve people's lives, big benefits, but they just don't get funded by government. They just don't get picked up because there's no mechanism to do that. Now, the reforms that I got we worked with the Bush and Obama administrations to get enacted, changed that. There were some federal grant programs that we developed with them where basically, long story short, evidence about what actually works was a key factor, selection factor in what gets funded and how the grant money goes out. And that's the kind of approach we bring to Maryland. Let me just, those are the 3 examples, concrete examples. There are many others, but one other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to do what's best for Marylanders because, and that's one of the reasons I'm not taking any money in my campaign from corporations or special interests. One other innovation that we're going to bring to state government is that when we roll out new initiatives like the ones I just described, we're going to require an independent assessment, a rigorous assessment, the results of which are going to be reported to the voters and to me as governor and to the General Assembly at the same time, so that everyone will see, did this initiative actually improve high school graduation rates or whatever the goal is? People won't have to just take my word for it. Here's the bottom line. I want to bring a new governing approach to our state, one where we're not just rolling out the next new plan and hoping it's going to work. We've done that. That's what we've been doing for decades. I mean, 20 years from now, will our children look back at this time and say, we faced all of these persistent problems, stagnant student achievement, stagnant poverty, stagnant wages, and we just kept doing the same thing again and again? Or will they say, at this moment in this election, Maryland did something extraordinary. We pioneered a new governing approach based on expanding solutions that don't just sound good, aren't just spending money, aren't just well-meaning, but have actually been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. And that we finally moved the damn needle on education and stagnant wages and healthcare and racial equity and other problems. That is the future I want for Maryland. I'm asking for your help to get us there. Let's do what works.
Thank you, John. I found, we've interviewed most of the candidates, if not all, for governor, and I find you're the first candidate who has made it a central theme of their opening remarks about evidence-based. In other words, to apply, if I'm correctly interpreting, to apply a rigorous standard to show that the money is working. And I'd like to start off by asking you, how did that become such a mantra of your campaign? Like, I mean, obviously based a little bit on your background, but where has this desire to show how programs work and whether effective grown from, and should you become governor, how would you apply it throughout the billions and billions and billions of dollars of state government money?
Well, I guess, I mean, my father was a medical scientist. He was he was a doctor, and he was a scientist at NIH. And I mean, at the breakfast table, he would always talk about controlled studies. He would, when I would come back from, and he was always a skeptic. And he would say, all these, he'd hear claims about vitamin C preventing cancer and all the rest. And he'd say, there's no evidence for that. And when I would come back from, graduate school or college or whatever, and talk about these new ideas I was learning about how to move people from welfare into the workforce and so on, he'd say, well, very interesting idea, John, but, is there a study to show that actually works? And, I found him very irritating for that reason, but, it kind of stuck. And that's the approach. As I got older and as I, served in the Clinton administration and Congress and so on, I recognized that it is many things. There's so many programs that are well-intentioned but don't deliver results. And I can give you some concrete examples in Maryland. And I thought this is an idea that could really make a major difference. We could start solving major problems if we just applied it. So that's what's motivating me here.
So let me ask you a question that I like to ask of all candidates. So, you've got your legs on the table of the governor's chair. You've already served your second term as governor. You're looking back on your last 8 years, saying it's been nice living in this house, this government house. I will tell you that I've been to the mansion several times. It needs a pool table in the downstairs. So please make sure you add a pool table and some foosball. It needs some more recreational activities down there. But my question to you is on a serious note, is when you look back at the ceiling, you're staring up at the ceiling after your two successful terms as governor, what do you want to be able to come back on a Zoom call and tell a lot more people have joined us, to tell all the people on this call today are the three things that you accomplished and you're most proud about at the end of your administration? What are the three things I got done that I'm going to look back and feel I feel good about what I did? I got this done.
Well, in all of these areas where I've talked about where Maryland has been stuck for decades, that we actually started moving the needle. We actually started improving lives in a meaningful way. So for example, by the end of my first term, if we do this tutoring for every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, we should be able to see real results on third grade reading achievement. Many more kids reading at grade level, being able to do basic math. That's at the end of my first term. And then there are longer term effects as well. The job training that's very effective. Listen, more than the bottom 40% of Maryland households have seen stagnant wages since 1980. after you adjust for inflation. The American narrative of optimism and progress, the idea that each generation will do better than the last, that we knew after World War II, that no longer applies to nearly half of our people. One of the things I want to be able to look back on and say is that we gave people effective ways, low and moderate income Marylanders, young adults and others, an effective way, the skills, the training they need to make it into the middle class, and it actually worked. We've got the evidence to show that it worked. So in all of these areas where we haven't made progress, to be able to do that, as well as other areas. Somebody asked a question here about violence in the state.
That was my next question. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So John, what would you do about the growing crime rate of violence in our state?
Well, Maryland saw a major, and the United States saw a major reduction in violent crime for many years leading up to about 2015. And then we've seen a reversal since then. And in Baltimore is now 7 years in a row with over 300 homicides a year.
When you look at the population, it's a stunning number.
It is. And to your point, we have almost as many homicides per year as New York City, which has 14 times the population of Baltimore. And
by the way, in Montgomery County, when we have tended to have around, it's approximately 20 homicides a year in a population of over 1 million people. In Baltimore City, which is about 2/3 of the population of Montgomery County, has 300 murders. So we're talking about 30 versus 300.
Yes.
And if you look at that right away, as a former New Yorker, and the mayor of New York is saying, people need to get back on the subways and stimulate the economy, and so that people can come back to work. But people don't want to go on the subways, not because of COVID, but because they're scared of getting shot. So yeah. This is a real feeling. So like, how do you balance crime fighting, and at the same time make sure we maintain, racial equity in our justice system, sort of a binary. We have to make sure that African-American men are not feeling targeted because of crimes, and at the same time we have to combat crime, and we have to make sure that everybody who's arrested by the police feels that they're being treated with respect, and at the same time we need our police to be more aggressive in combating crime. So how do you weigh these different options, these different choices?
Well, it's not an either or kind of thing. It's not mutually exclusive. One thing I will, again, to pick up on your point here, Baltimore has lost population since about 1950. Mm-hmm. It used to be a much larger city, and over the past 10 years, it's lost further population, as the latest census results show. And Baltimore, I think, will never recover economically or population until the safety issue is addressed. And people deserve to be able to go about their daily activities, send their kids to school, go to the grocery store and so on, and feel safe. That's sort of a basic, it's a matter of quality of life. It's a matter of life and death. So this is an urgent issue. I would, in Baltimore and other parts of the state, one of my first actions in my first 100 days would be to partner with local officials to mobilize state funding, federal funding, local funding, and staff on a crime fighting approach called focused deterrence, which is an evidence-based crime fighting approach that's been very successful in other cities, as I will describe in a moment. And there's receptiveness to it in Baltimore among the police chief and others. It's an approach that recognizes that the majority of violent crimes are committed by a relatively small number of individuals who are repeat violent offenders. Many of them are gang involved. And what this approach does, it offers them a positive way forward and invites them in for meetings with community officials, community leaders, law enforcement, and social service agencies, and offers them a positive path forward, like counseling and job opportunities and educational opportunities and so on. But these meetings also make clear that if they continue to act violently, they are going to be the focus of extraordinary attention from law enforcement. And this approach, if it's implemented well, has been found in a number of cities, including in Oakland, California in particular, to help reduce the homicide rate by as much as 50%. It's been very effective in New Orleans as well, and other cities. That would be one of my top priorities in the area of public safety. There are other things we should do, drug courts and so on, that are also, have strong evidence of that they reduce crime. And I can discuss those as well. But that's one example, one main example of how I would act.
Yeah, Jay Miller just added to our conversation that you can decrease crime by improving education and job opportunities. I'd like your reaction to that statement.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and that's why, and that's one of the components of focused deterrence, for example, that it offers these people a positive way forward with job opportunities and educational opportunities and training and so on. And more generally, over the long term, yes, giving people opportunity through education and jobs is a way to prevent crime. But I do want to say we can't wait forever, meaning we do want to do those things simultaneously. We want to prevent crime over the long term by addressing the root causes, but we also need to act urgently in the moment to prevent crime. And so a number of my proposals in this area, like focused deterrence, there's also hotspots policing I'm happy to talk about, are designed to address the immediate problem as well.
I think, let me ask you a little bit about a topic we haven't touched on. I know that from that recently surveys have been taken of about the Jewish community, and for Jews under the age of 40, the single most important domestic issue is climate change and environmental concerns.
Yeah.
While environment tends to be usually probably requires on a large scale a national approach, there are things that as governor, by yourself, by working with your fellow governors and the mayor of DC and sort of regional compacts can do to help improve the state of our environment, and even working with local leaders, county executives and mayors. Have you given any thought to how you would approach an environmental policy under a Barron administration?
Yes. So I agree that this is an issue that demands urgent attention at all levels. It's kind of an existential issue, as I think people are recognizing, the folks under 40 and others, like me, over 40. It is an existential issue for our planet and humanity. So Maryland has actually led the nation in carbon emission reductions. We've had about a 38% reduction in carbon emissions over the past 15 years, which is more than any other state. One of the reasons for that is we're part of an 11-state, and you may have anticipated this in your question, Ron. We're part of an 11-state regional initiative called—
I didn't actually know that. 11-state regional initiative?
A regional initiative called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI for short, where the 11 states together put a cap on carbon emissions from power plants, and a legally enforceable cap that lowers over time. And then industry figures out how to meet those caps, those limits, in the most cost-efficient manner. The 11 RGGI states together, including some big states like New York and New Jersey and so on, have reduced power plant emissions by 47% carbon emissions since 2009. So it's been extremely successful. It has buy-in from industry because of the thing I described. They figure out how to meet the caps in the most cost-effective way. And it has bipartisan support. This was actually started by Governor George Pataki of New York, a Republican. One of my main initiatives in this area, I have a number of climate initiatives, but would be to take the same approach that has worked so well to reduce power plant emissions and apply it to other sectors of the economy, like transportation and buildings and industry. Transportation in particular accounts for about 36% of carbon emissions. There's a budding initiative. There are only 2 states that are involved in it right now, called the Transportation and Climate Initiative. that applies the same regional approach. As governor, I would bring Maryland into that initiative, and I would try to bring other states like, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and others along as well, because Maryland is one mid-sized state. If we're really going to have an impact on climate that's much more meaningful, we need to act regionally, and this is an approach that works, and we should be applying it to other areas.
John, I'm going to ask you a question that has obviously resurfaced in the last few days. I didn't ask the other candidates this because the Roe v. Wade decision obviously just came out. JCRC's policy is that, and 82% of American Jews believe in women having pretty much full access to reproductive care.
Right.
There's going to be about approximately half the states, or a third to a half, are going to have abortion. Approximately half are going to eliminate it in round terms. Even less than half are going to have 17. I think was one number I heard, maybe more. We can expect that there's going to be a lot of people from the southern part of this country, women, who to come to Maryland for reproductive health care, or for abortions, or that they can't obtain in their own state.
Right.
We 2/3 of Maryland's counties don't have an abortion provider. 2/3. That's why the state assembly passed that $3.5 million to allow physician's assistants and nurse practitioners, often in more rural areas. But if you're outside 5 or 6 counties, it's very difficult. But we can expect that there will be an influx, people flying into Baltimore because it's less expensive, or into Montgomery County from DC to get this care. And I'd like to know what, and it's going to become difficult to protect these places, because these places are going to become targets of places from right-wing extremists from other states. And I'd like to know if, it's not if, when more women come to Maryland for reproductive health care, what can you do to, number one, ensure their security, and to ensure the security of these clinics that will go to them? And number two, how would you stand when other states start suing Maryland for information about these women, about whether they came there? Because we know today, in an age of mobile tracking and in an age of technology, that depending on how motivated states are, they might look at seeking information from other states about where residents of their own went for services. They can charge them when they get home. So you can see where I'm going. What is your overall choice of how Maryland can be an island of reproductive freedom for women from other states who are seeking assistance?
So I was kind of shocked when the ruling came down. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but I just found it really shocking. I mean, the decision about whether to become a parent and when to become a parent is just about the most consequential decision a person can make in their life. And the idea that the government, from the moment of conception, can make that decision and not the individual woman is absolutely appalling to me. I think it's the opposite of conservative. It is government intrusion into the most personal and consequential decisions that someone can make. So to your question, number one, I support a statewide referendum to embed the protections and codify the protections of Roe v. Wade of choice into the Maryland Constitution. Currently, it's part of Maryland law. That's good, but we need to make it more permanent, and it should be part of the Constitution. Second, I was proud of the General Assembly for their recent action to expand the number of providers in Maryland that can provide abortion services, to include advanced practice nurses, and many others, physician's assistants and others, and to provide funding for the training of those folks. Now, Governor Hogan had withheld the money for the training. I would on day one reverse that because of what you just said, Ron. It's not just in Maryland. We need to increase the capacity of the state to provide women's reproductive services, for folks who are coming from out of state. And we also need to fully fund security at abortion clinics, using federal funds, state funds, and others to make sure that that they're secured and that
assuming there is no prohibition coming on federal funds for that.
Right, that's exactly right. If there is but we need to do whatever we can at the state level to ensure that this that women's rights are protected. I mean, I think that is just of paramount importance in this, pretty scary time.
So let me ask you, John. So I think you indicated. I think you indicated that you belong to which synagogue growing up? Did you say, or?
Beth High congregation. That's where we had our kids bar mitzvahed, and yeah. So
let me ask you something that I haven't been able to ask. I didn't have a chance to ask Doug Gansler this, but I should have asked him. What role has Judaism for you set forth any sort of moral or ethical codes that helps drive you in your theory of governments, or does it use you with a set of values or ideals about how you want to govern, or what's been its impact on your life?
I'm very proud of being Jewish. One of the things I love about being Jewish is the commitment that the community has to improve the world, to make the world a better place. And the fact that the Jewish community stood alongside, just as one example, alongside, the Black community in the civil rights struggle in this country. The fact that so many groups, are supportive of immigrants, other immigrants from Afghanistan and elsewhere into this country, the fight for social justice, all of that, the commitment to public service. I mean, that's been the through line of my career. I went to law school. I practiced law for 5 minutes. I don't have anything against the practice of law, but my whole career has been devoted to public service. I came by it through my parents. Both my mother was taught kids with reading disabilities in middle school. She was a special education teacher. My father, as I mentioned, was a medical researcher. And that reflects their values, which reflect the larger values of the Jewish community. So that commitment to make the world a better place is something I love about the Jewish community. That, along with corned beef and and the Jewish humor and all of that, I'm very proud of being Jewish.
I got a whole list of good jokes for you that I would tell you in private if you like Jewish humor, that are not off color or insensitive, but just funny. Anyway, on that note, I'd like to see if there's anybody else who'd like to ask a question. I'll give you a minute, because if not, our candidate has got a lot of door knocking and a lot of phone calls to make and a lot to do. I'm going to ask you one last question if we don't have any questions. John, I have not seen your name in the top 4 candidates for governor in any polling. I mean, it's a reality. You know that as well as I do.
Yeah.
So my question to you, is that a question, Jay Miller, or a hello? Or that you wish to ask a question? You're on mute. Do you want to ask a question? Nod if you want to ask a question.
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Jay, please do.
Actually, it's somewhat what you were just going to say.
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, John's not in one of the top 3 candidates, and the question is, to be somewhat blunt, why should I vote for him when, in a sense, I might be sort of wasting a vote by not voting for one of the top 3 candidates? I mean, even Doug Gansler is certainly higher in probably in polling than John.
an infectious diseases specialist, but you have about 100 of them.
Can you please put yourself on mute,
Turning lines.
Matt J?
Is Miriam Barshak?
Or Judy? We hear your Judy Dennis. Please put yours. Thank you. Thank you, Jay, for your question.
Yeah,
John?
thank you, Jay. And I love the universe background you have there. So to address your question, this is by every account and by all the polling, this is a wide open race with 30 to 40% of the voters undecided. Undecided is far in the lead, and there's no clear front runner. There are candidates that are better known than me, that's for sure. But that is, I think, to some extent, and long story short, voters haven't known me until about 10 days ago when we went on the air statewide with our television ads and social media. We have the resources to get that message out to really saturate the airwaves. We'll see what happens. But I think when voters get to know me and my message, which they have not before, the polls will change. So we'll find out in the next 2-3 weeks. And if they do, then this whole dynamic you talk about, well, why should I wait? But then it turns on its head.
I should point out that the largest, in John's defense, the largest category of voters right now in Maryland is undecided.
Right.
31%, and Peter Franchot is at 20, which means, and at this stage in the game, with so much exposure, because from my history in politics, I know that there's always room for a person to emerge at the last moment, catch fire, and win the field. That's happened more times than you can imagine when the field's been stunned when someone's come from behind to win. So,
Yeah.
Polls polls are exactly what they want, but the ultimate poll is on election day. So, John, I would, unless you'd like to add something to conclude.
Well, let me just mention to your point. I mean, this is a typical scenario where you have 9 people running, no clear front runner, with 9 people splitting the vote. This is a typical scenario where what you described, Ron, can happen, where a new face with a compelling message can break through. You asked me if I had any final words.
Please.
Well, let me say how I differ from the other candidates. It's been implicit here, but just to put a fine point on it. All the Democratic candidates, all 9 of us, we share similar goals. We all want to improve education and wages, break the cycle of poverty, and so on. But the other candidates' approach to achieving those goals misses a fundamental point, which is that many government programs, no matter how well-intentioned, don't work. We've seen that again and again when the results are actually measured. So when the other candidates propose, as they have throughout the course of this campaign and in every single forum and so on, when they propose to roll out one unproven plan after the next and hope it's going to work, that's just not going to bring progress. That's what we've been doing for decades. What I'm proposing, is something that is fundamentally different. It is government expanding solutions, focusing like a laser beam on solutions that have been tested and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. I'm from the show me wing of the Democratic Party. That's the only way we're gonna make progress on these major issues, and that's why I hope you'll consider me in the upcoming election. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk with you all, and I hope you'll have me back after the primary. When I win the primary, and then
If
when
you
I'm
win the
governor.
Democratic nomination, we will be spending a lot of time with you. We have a lot of things we'd like to request and speak about. Would you like to give out your website or any
Yes.
other information so that the people on this call can stay in touch with you?
Yes. Let me put it in the chat here, but the website is John Barron, JONBARON, one word, .com. www.johnbarron.com. And let's see, I think Arturo, would you mind putting the, Arturo's on the call. There it is, johnbarron.com. Well, somebody else, thank you. Lisa.
My colleague Lisa did it. Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Okay, on that note, John, even in the most nonpartisan way possible, as a 501c, I wish you the best of luck. And thank you for joining us. And we have a real series of regulars who join us for these meetings. A group of people who I have to praise them. They're very committed. There are about 10 people who have shown up for every JCRC gubernatorial forum. These people take their votes more seriously than anybody I've ever met before. If you're having trouble, anyone with any candidates, you can go to our website. And John filled out the questionnaire, thank you. There is a very detailed questionnaire and where you can enter about 10 different issues of candidates running for governor. We sent, as I said earlier, we texted it out to 50,000. It's going out to all the synagogues. It's going to be on all the listservs. It's going to be to the point of annoying all of you, which is our intention, by the way. Our intention is to annoy you so that everybody does go ahead and understand that this is an important election, that you have the resources to vote. Most important, early voting is opening up quite soon. And then after that, you have a chance to vote on primary day, which is July 19th. And most important, please vote. No matter who you choose to vote for, vote, vote, vote. The last few years have shown us how important that is. So on that note, John, and also my friend Scott Gale, thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you the best of luck in your campaign. And thank you for joining us, everyone, for this evening. Our next call, I think, is going to be with Congressman Donna Edwards, Lisa, coming up soon. I think so. Okay, but anyway, if Your Honor, if you do get these informations about our forums by social media, do us a favor and please go ahead and sign up to get them on our email list, because we do have other forums coming up for Congress, and I think we also have one more for Attorney General with Mrs. O'Malley. All right, Judge O'Malley. Best wishes, everyone. Thank you, and have a Shavua Tov, a great week and a great day.